I'm here with Don Iveson, who is the new-ish
Ish.
Mayor of Edmonton. And
Almost a year.
Almost a year. We just had a panel at the Canada 2020 conference on infrastructure, and you had some interesting stories to tell, as almost any big city mayor would, about the challenges that you have dealing with infrastructure. What are some of those challenges?
Well, first of all, Alberta's Canada's fastest growing province. Edmonton is Alberta's fastest growing city, and therefore also the Canada's fastest, or the nation's fastest growing city. And so we've got growth pressures, 3.5% growth in population, and that's about the most that an industrialized economy can manage before things just go sideways. So we're having trouble building schools, hospitals to keep up. We can manage roads and drainage and the basics, but it's tough. There are constraints. And at the same time as the city is growing, it needs to adapt. And so we've got this urban shift that we're doing. As many sprawling North American cities struggle to now build up to revitalize older areas, we're working to do that. Key feature of that is transit, which we've been investing in. We were actually the first North American city to build light rail. Back in the late 60s, we started the work and built it, opened it in the 70s for Commonwealth Games in 1978, and we've added to it incrementally since then. And we've got provincial and federal investment lined up to build another 13 kilometers of it the next few years. But out beyond that, I have no certainty, and I've got another many billions of dollars worth of light rail that I need to connect people to jobs and to school and to entertainment and to keep activity vibrant in our downtown, to decongest our roads, to clean our air, to help people deal with the rising cost of housing by lowering their cost of transportation. Like every other mayor of a major Canadian city right now, I've got a multi-billion-dollar transit plan. We hear a lot about Toronto's, which is essential. Having lived there and having traveled there, it's essential. But it's equally essential in Ottawa to get phase 2 of the light rail, a line of sight to that. Equally important in Edmonton and Calgary, equally important for the Broadway subway line and for Gregor in Vancouver. And so we get together as big city mayors and we sort of compare our lists, and the needs vastly outstrip the resources that are available, not just federally, but also provincially and certainly within our own municipalities with the limited resources we have, growth pressures we have, aging infrastructure we've inherited, and so on and so forth. So the scale is broad, but there's a coalition of people working on it, and more discussion about the upsides of making these investments in transformative infrastructure that'll keep Canada competitive.
Okay. Edmonton has a lot of federal MPs. Most of them sit in the government caucus. What do they say when you share these concerns with them?
Well, certainly our MPs, and we have MPs from different parties in Edmonton, but they all understand, because we've been clear, my council passed a unanimous motion. Not every city is as united on this across the country. We passed a unanimous motion saying our top priority for new investment in transformative infrastructure is light rail. So when you can send a clear signal like that, everybody hears it. Your MPs from all quarters hear it. Our members of the Legislative Assembly and the provincial government heard it, and we were able to rally together $1.8 billion worth of investment for the Southeast LRT line. And that's good, but I'd really like a sustainable, predictable, national and provincial and municipal sort of tripartite agreement on how we're going to continue to fund transit really for the next 10 to 20 years in this country in order to reshape our cities in a more urban way.
One of the things that you said in the panel that surprised me is that Edmonton faces weather challenges that your predecessors would not have faced. Are things changing really that quickly, and to what extent?
With our drainage system in particular, though it even affects our roads, northern cities all struggle depending on their climate and their soil conditions with frost heaving, which blows your roads apart. So we get potholes. And Edmonton has historically suffered lots in a really bad year. Well, the years of freeze and thaw seem to be becoming more common. And then in the summertime, we're seeing more intense summer storm activity, thunderstorms. And so even over the last 50 years, a storm used to, a typical 1 in 100 year storm would drop 2 inches of rain in an hour. Now it drops 2.5. So where does that extra half an inch of rain go over a whole neighborhood? Well, if you don't recalibrate your drainage system, it winds up in people's basements, it winds up in flooded out properties and businesses, and that's bad for business. It costs a lot of money, it's driven insurance premiums up. So because of changing weather patterns, many cities across the country are now starting to struggle with having to recalibrate their drainage systems. And so we've looked after our system really, really well in relative terms, but now to have to go back in and resize it for changing weather is an added pressure for us to deal with, and one that I think on the basis of the need to invest in climate change adaptation, if we're not going to mitigate it, if it's going to happen, the further north you are, most of the climate models say it's more extreme. So as a northern city, we're thinking about this now as a major risk to our viability.
Now, Edmonton sits, it's the gateway to the oil sands in a sense, which is the most economically dynamic, politically sensitive part of the Canadian political economy right now, identified not just by the Conservatives but by the Liberals as a driver of future growth. Given all of that, are you surprised, as I sometimes am, that Edmonton-Fort Mac, the Edmonton-Calgary connection doesn't seem to have the political attention that it might seem to justify?
Well, I think from the central to eastern Canadian perspective, it's still not necessarily fully understood just how much of the economic growth is being driven in Alberta and in northern Alberta in particular. Last year, 40% of the jobs in this country, net new jobs, were created in my city region. So we are powering the economy in terms of job growth. They're good jobs, they're skilled labor jobs for the most part. So if the tax rolls are increasing and the government's climbing out of deficit, it's because there's new revenue and economic growth happening chiefly in Alberta, but also in Saskatchewan. And there's no doubt that the hydrocarbon economy, both gas and traditional oil and now unconventional oil, is powering an awful lot of that. One of the things about it that most people even in Edmonton don't understand is actually they think about it as a bonanza industry, because that's historically how oil and gas has worked. You have a big expenditure during the drilling phase, and then once the pump is installed or the well is kind of fitted up to a pipeline, you don't have to go back until you close it down again. But the oil sands is actually more of a manufacturing process. A lot of value gets added, a lot of technology is deployed on an ongoing basis in order to operate and maintain the oil sands. And so as long as it's viable to, as long as there's a world price that justifies continuing to operate that machinery, to run those pumps and to maintain all of that stuff, which is very labor intensive, very capital intensive, that's now hardwired into the gross domestic product of northern Alberta and the country, to just operate the oil sands that exists today. The bit over top of that is the new construction, and that ebbs and flows. But as more and more of it comes online, and in 2008 is where the operating and maintenance expenditures surpassed the capital expenditures in any given year, and they continue to rise as more facilities come online. That's now hardwired into the sort of the base GDP of the country until the resource is depleted, which in most of these cases is decades and decades away. Now the question is, what do we want to do with the prosperity that we've generated from this today? I think we should be building infrastructure, and we should be investing in human capital so that we can be competitive into the future. And we should be supporting research and development that further improves the cost competitiveness and environmental performance of the oil sands. So black boxes being developed at the University of Alberta, or at Waterloo for that matter, help us improve our performance, reduce the cost, ensure the long-term viability of the resource, while satisfying global demand that we do it more and more responsibly. And then those black boxes can be exported to other people who need other solutions to their mining, their process control, their hydrocarbon operations. And that should be the basis of our future sort of renewable economy that we can build on the fossil fuel economy that's in Alberta and Saskatchewan today.
Okay. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.